Welcome to the Real Wealth Investor Academy's module, The Basics of Real Estate Investing, with me, Kathy Fettke, CEO and co-founder of Real Wealth Network. So first, we need to let you know what our attorney says, which is basically always check with your own CPA and attorney to make sure that what we're telling you works for your specific situation. Of course, we haven't got our crystal ball completely working yet, so past performance is no guarantee of future results. And again, number 3 is that while we do our best to be accurate and current, things change. So we're just telling you what we're aware of now. And now moving on, I want to talk to you about the top reasons why I think real estate outperforms other investments, and starting with growth. So real estate has provided investors with steady growth since 1940, even in spite of the housing recessions of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 0 years. Of course, we know all about those because we just survived it. So take a look at this. We see in 1940, 1950, 1960, 1970, we didn't see such huge gains in real estate until after the 70s. And I'm going to go into that a little bit later. But still, even though it's small growth, look, from the 40s to the 50s, it doubled. It more than doubled. From the 50s to the 60s, it almost doubled. 60s to 70s, it more than doubled. And then, wow, look at the jump from the 70s to the 80s in median single family home prices. Tripled nearly. And then from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, you just see massive growth in real estate. Now, is it that real estate became really that much more valuable over time? Or is it that people have started to see it as an investment and they're jumping into it more? Well, you can see with growth numbers like this, no wonder the hedge funds are jumping into real estate now because of these huge returns. Again, I'm not so sure that it's because real estate has become that much more valuable. What we do know is there's a limited amount of land and a population that's growing, so that may have something to do with it. But really, what happened is in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. Now, up until then, we had to have a certain amount of money tied to gold. In other words, the Federal Reserve couldn't just print money out of thin air like it can today. It had to be tied to the amount of gold we had. Money represented the amount of gold we had. Well, we needed more money. Politicians needed more money. They wanted to spend it. We didn't have more gold. So Nixon just changed things and said, well, it doesn't really have to be tied to gold. That's when the Federal Reserve had the freedom to just print, and the U.S. government can borrow from the Federal Reserve. See, our Constitution says that we can't just print money because our forefathers knew that wasn't a good idea. But it didn't say anything about the Federal Reserve printing it and the United States government borrowing from the Federal Reserve. So technicality, but that is what's happening, and that is why we see this massive growth in home prices after that happened, because it just represents inflation. Inflation has gone rampant since that day happened, and real estate moves along with inflation because it's a hard asset. So as long as we're going to be in this inflationary environment where our government can just keep printing money out of thin air, this is probably the results we're going to see. All right, now leverage is another reason why I really like real estate, because as we saw in the last slide, prices are going up. It's harder and harder for people just to pay cash, but you don't have to. You can use a loan. So if you were to buy a $150,000 home, you would only have to put $30,000 of your own money into it. Then, in addition to that, you can rent out that home and let your tenant pay the payment. That the money that you used to borrow to buy this asset, you can have someone else pay it off for you. So you got double leverage here. Not only that, they can pay the taxes, the insurance costs, all the repairs. It's incredible leverage. Now, if the home were to appreciate at about a 5% growth rate, it would be worth $611,000 in 30 years. You would own it free and clear at that time. So again, where else can you put $30,000 into an investment and come out 30 years with 600,000? I'm sure there are other investments. I just don't know of them. If you know of them, let me know. Now, you might be saying 5%. Well, as you saw from the last slide, with prices going up, even in spite of recessions, every single decade, they go up home prices go up on an average of 6.5%. So I think using a 5% growth rate is pretty fair. Okay, well, maybe you're saying, I like all this. I like the idea of leverage, but I can't wait 30 years. I'm old. All right. Well, maybe you're not old, but you still don't want to wait 30 years. So here's the thing you can do with leverage. You can work with it. If you made an extra $1,000 per year towards your mortgage on a $100,000 loan, you would pay it off in 22 years. And if you want to do it faster than that, you say, I don't have 22 years. How about you pay an extra $2,500 per year and pay it off in 17 years? Is that feeling more doable, closer to your goal of retirement? If not, all right, I don't know that I can do it a whole lot faster for you, but let's look at this. An extra $5,000 per year paid toward your $100,000 mortgage, you'd have it paid off in 12 years. Now we can see our future 12 years from now and say, hey, it wouldn't be so bad to own a bunch of properties free and clear in 12 years. This is how you can do it, by paying a little extra. Again, you might be saying, where am I going to come up with $5,000 a year to put towards my mortgage? Here's how. We are finding cash flow properties that cash flow about $400 a month. If you take that $400 a month extra cash flow, and this is after all expenses, the rental income is that good and mortgage rates are that low that you can get this kind of cash flow today still. So with that extra $400 a month, you put it towards the mortgage, you can pay that property off in 12 years. Now all that rental income just goes in your pocket to help you with retirement. Accelerated growth. Again, this is another reason why I love real estate. Let's say instead of putting that $30,000 as a down payment, you put it into stocks or gold or other investments on Wall Street. If you got a 10% return, which is really good, okay? Let's say you got a 10% return on your $30,000, you get $3,000 per year. But if you put that $30,000 as a down payment on a property, now you've been able to leverage and buy a $150,000 property. But when you leverage, you still own that property. Other countries aren't like this, but in the US, you put that $30,000 down, you get a $120,000 mortgage, but you own the asset, even though you don't really. I mean, the bank does, but you're on title, which means that you get to reap the rewards of growth. So even though you only put $30,000 in, you own a $150,000 asset. At 10%, your ROI, your return on investment, is $15,000. That's way more than if you had, just put it in stocks or gold, that $30,000. Okay, but you're going to say, where am I going to get 10%? Okay, well, let's say that you get 5%, which I said is about the growth rate that's been the average since the 60s on real estate, even with the ups and downs and all the recessions and everything. So I think you can pretty safely say you'll get 5% on real estate if you're buying right. And that's a $7,500 annual return. So still double what you would have gotten if you just bought stocks or gold or, other investments. Let's just say you're very pessimistic and you think it's only going to be 2%. That's where you will make the same kind of return on investment that you would get had you just bought, not leveraged and just put the $30,000 into buying stocks. So again, accelerated growth is a wonderful thing. But now add to it taxes and the tax benefits. So first of all, it's no surprise to anybody that taxes are going up. And taxes and inflation destroy your wealth. So here's just a quick look at some of the increases. But the top income tax rate in 2012 was 35%. In 2013, 39.6%. What's it going to be in 2014 and moving forward? Well, we know we have a big problem in our government being in debt and borrowing money that we don't have to pay back. So there's a good chance they're going to find a way to get it from you. Top rate on long-term capital gains has gone up from 15% in 2012 to 20% in 2013 and probably will go up. And then, it goes on. And I don't know how much of this applies to you, but I think we can all agree on one thing. The taxes are not going to go down, unfortunately. I wish they would, but they're probably not. So how can real estate help you with this problem? Let's take a look at some of the tax advantages that I'm surprised a lot of people still don't know about, but here you go. Here are some of the things you can deduct when you buy rental property. You can deduct the mortgage interest, the property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, professional fees. So when you go to your CPA and you need them to work out all these tax advantages that you get to write that off too. Education, just the money that you've paid to be a part of the academy. That's a write-off if you own property. Traveling to your properties. These are all things that you can deduct, and it makes a big difference on your final tax return. And I haven't even begun to talk about depreciation. This is on top of all that. The IRS lets us write off our rental property as if it's worth nothing in 27 and a half years. Now, is it true that a property gets worn out and turns into nothing in 27 and a half years? Of course not. We're buying properties that are 100 years old in some places, and they're beautiful and well built. So no, I don't know where the IRS came up with this, but this is how they do it. So basically how this works in numbers is that you take 80% of the value of the property. So let's say you bought a $100,000 property. The government would say, well, 20% of that is probably land. You can't depreciate that. Land isn't breaking down, but your house might be. And so they take 80% of that 100,000, which is 80,000, and divide it by 27 and a half years, which is a $2,900 annual deduction approximately per rental property at 100,000. So there are a lot of rules around this. You've got to talk to your CPA. If you earn more than $150,000 a year, you may not be able to take advantage of this. You might have to just use it for the future. But again, this is where you need a very good CPA. We can certainly give you a list of accountants who understand these kinds of tax advantages, because there's a chance the one you're working with isn't an expert in real estate investing. Then on top of this, there's the 1031 exchange, and you can defer the capital gain. So let's say you're in a high income tax bracket and you buy a house for $100,000. It's worth $200,000 and you want to sell it. You made a $100,000 gain. Right now, you'd have to pay 20% of that to the government unless you exchanged it and bought more property. Again, there's all kinds of rules about the 1031 exchange, but it is a wonderful way to not have to pay those capital gain taxes until you die, basically. And the funny thing is, well, not that it's funny that you die, but when you die, the properties can be passed on to your children, and that capital gain just disappears because the properties are marked up back up to today's value. So again, any of this can change. There's discussion now about some of these things changing. So I want to let you know that in July 2013, I'm telling you this, and always talk to your CPA to make sure that you know about any changes. But as of now, this is a wonderful benefit.